On the other side, we have the Dolphins and the Bills. And it has looked, early in the year, the two met. The Bills absolutely destroyed them. I think everybody at that point thought, man, this team's one of the Super Bowl favorites. The season did not go as planned for Buffalo. They were 6-6 a couple weeks ago, had below a 10% chance to get in the playoffs.
I think they're 5-6.
They might have been 5-6, you're right. They were going into, even with a win yesterday over the Cowboys, they're just 30% to make the playoffs still. Largely, the reason that is because the Bills, of their 6 losses, 5 of them have come against AFC teams, and they have lost the tiebreaker against all other wildcard teams currently. Like, all the wildcard teams they either haven't played or they lost to. So they essentially lose every tiebreaker. So they have to be a game above of every other wildcard team in the race right now in order to win that wildcard spot. However, they somehow still have a shot at the division. And when you look at how it plays out, the Dolphins the next 2 weeks, they play home against the Cowboys and at the Ravens. You have to believe the way that the Dolphins have played against good teams this year, it would be a very big long shot to say they win both of those games, right? Like, more than likely they're going to lose one of those games. You look at the Bills' schedule the next 2 weeks. At the Chargers, just fired their head coach, just gave up 63 on defense last game to the Oakland Raiders, who don't have much of an offense. And then they go home and play the Patriots in a revenge game, who they lost to earlier this season. So, if the Bills win those 2 games, and the Dolphins do end up losing one of the 2 against the Cowboys or Ravens, that final game of the season, Week 18, in Miami will be for the division. And all of a sudden, the Buffalo Bills could host a playoff game. I mean, do you think that's a feasible outcome here?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to beat the Chargers and the Pats.
Right.
Unless something very strange happens. They're going to beat the Chargers and the Pats that are playing for absolutely nothing. And then we've touched on it all year. Although you're not a believer in the Bills, you're on the record saying you're certainly not a believer in the Dolphins. So, like, that game in Miami, you may pick the whatever, but it's a coin flip game, I would say. I mean, I think if the Bills win another 2 in a row and go in there 10-6, they're going to end up beating Miami. But I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. I do think Buffalo is going to eventually get in because I think they do. I get what you're saying with the tiebreakers, and it'll be tough. But if they get to 10-7, I mean, I guess.
I actually
did the Texans hold the tiebreaker against them too?
I don't know. All I know is this. I looked at it last night, and I'll tell you this. We're looking at this sheet right now, right, with all the wild card teams.
Yeah. There's a lot to break down there.
I'll put it on the screen. The only teams that they played of these 8, they lost to, right? So they lost to every team they played. It was 3 teams. I forget who it was. I think it's the Broncos. I know they lost to the Broncos.
Bengals, maybe they lose
Broncos, Bengals, when Joe Burrow was still healthy. And there was one other team. I think it might have been the Jaguars.
Yeah, they lost to the Jags in
London. Right. Yeah. So those 3 teams, they do not hold the tiebreaker. Like I said a minute ago, the next level when it's not a divisional race for tiebreakers comes down to conference record. The Bills are currently 8-6. 5 of their losses have come to AFC teams. They will not have the tiebreaker over any of the teams. So they essentially will have to have a better record than the Jaguars, the Texans, the Colts, the Browns, the Bengals, the Broncos, the Steelers, all of them, if they want to get in. Now, I get it. Probably you're looking at the Broncos and the Broncos who hold that tiebreaker and the Steelers, and they're probably out, right? Like, they would have to essentially win out just to even be in that conversation. But, I mean, it's not a stretch to think that 3 of those teams can end up with the 10-7 record. That's why I actually believe that if the Bills get in, it's only going to be as division champs. Because if they lose one of the next 3 games, I just don't see a scenario where they get in a wild card at 10-7 if they don't hold a tiebreaker, which they do not, right? So, like, how do they get in at that point? I think they don't.
Yeah, they might have to win out.
I think they have to win out. I mean, the only other way they could get in is if Miami maybe lost 2 of those games. They lost both the games to Dallas and the Ravens, and then the Bills win that last week. The Bills could drop one. That could happen too.
Could happen.
But again, in that scenario, the Bills would still only get in as a divisional champs. They would not get in the wild card spot. I think they're either hosting a playoff game or they are out. That's why they only have a 30% chance to make the playoffs.
Makes sense because they lose all that time.
Right, and if Miami wins the next 2 games, Miami's division champs, and now the Bills are playing that last week just to have a chance at a wild card spot. So it's going to come down to the wire. This is one of the wilder finishes.
Might not be horrible. It may be better off for the Bills at the Dolphins in that scenario if they do somehow win the next 2 games, which I don't necessarily think they will. But if they do and have that locked up, then you're playing the Bills with nothing to play for, trying to get healthy.
So I thought
unless they're trying to get the number. Yeah.
That's the thing.
Maybe. I don't. Oh, yeah, because the Ravens still have to play. Well, it'll all come down to that Week 17 game between the Dolphins and the Ravens, though. Because if the Ravens beat the Dolphins and they're already a game up on them and hold a tie break.
But no, but what you're saying is, in order for that to happen, the Dolphins would have to beat the Ravens. So then they would actually be the 1 seed at that point, and that last game would indeed matter. So
it's basically just going to come down to Buffalo having to win out.
They have to win out. Yeah. They really have to win out.
Or get really lucky with someone losing 2 games in front of them.
I mean, crazier things have happened. They could get in as a wild card, but going to be very, very tough.